Here's why you need to read this book. James Rickards, the author, is now well aware of Bitcoin. When he wrote Currency Wars, Bitcoin was not yet on his radar. But in this newer book, he actually brings it up. However, when it comes to Bitcoin, he maintains a cautious distance. Instead, he advocates buying gold. And his reasoning for recommending gold, Tom, is the same as mine. When a geopolitical crisis strikes, the very first thing that happens is capital controls. That's how he sees it. That's why global elites right now are preparing specifically for capital controls. They've been for years. After the 2008 financial crisis, they concluded that at critical moments, interest rates alone won't do the job. They'll need to control capital directly. That was the takeaway, and that's what they've been preparing for. Exactly the same conclusion I've come to. So from that conclusion, he recommends buying gold. But my message to you is, the inherent properties of Bitcoin will shine in moments like this. That's my position. Now, geopolitics is full of conspiracy theories, so I tread carefully around it. But James Rickards is no conspiracy theorist. Still, the book covers many things you typically come across in conspiracy circles. Now, as we look toward 2022 and 2023, we see that credit has ballooned completely. Even stocks of companies with no real earnings have skyrocketed in price. Anyone can see this is abnormal, but if they try to fix it by raising interest rates, it'll only lead to a financial crisis in developed countries, followed by geopolitical crises in emerging markets. Now the question is, will you still trust the elites? Will you go on serving their big picture agenda? Will you keep following their script as a cog in their plan, even when the house is on fire? They won't tell you it's burning. They'll say there's just a temporary system glitch. But the fundamentals are solid. They'll assure you. That's what they always say. And so in the end, you'll be trapped in a theater fire, unable to run for the exit. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's game over. Here's the conclusion. A phase transition is coming. In Bitcoin's price, a phase shift. So what is a phase transition? In physics, when water starts to boil, it stays liquid for a while. But once it crosses a threshold, it suddenly turns to vapor. And on the surface of that water, there's massive instability. It's neither quite liquid, nor quite gas. Particles start colliding chaotically. Now, if the market stays under control and interest rates go up, Bitcoin will tank hard. If the Bitcoin bubble bursts with a 20 to 30% correction, altcoins could get wrecked by 90% or more. But when a phase transition hits, there's a high chance panic buying will follow. And here's why. As the author also says, the true value of Bitcoin lies not in hype, but rather in how it disrupts. The elite's covert manipulative agenda. That's not my theory. It's what the author says. The original idea was to digitize everything. So when the moment comes with everything digitized, it's easy to freeze assets. Even if you buy gold, you're not really holding the physical metal. So who holds it then? It's sitting in a vault under the New York Fed. What you own is just a gold account. That's not real gold. It's a reverse pyramid. Very little physical gold sits at the bottom, while claims on that gold are huge. That's what happens when finance tokenizes ownership. They've even done the same with base money, right? It's time to think seriously about what this means. So why is it that American elites, when it comes to Bitcoin, only allow futures? Like future ETFs? Before that, the CME allowed Bitcoin futures trading. The reason is, they saw how effective it was when they used futures to control gold. In reality, there's hardly any gold behind those futures. But when gold rises beyond their control, they unleash massive short selling. The shorting is mostly done by governments or institutional entities. But it's not physical gold. It's paper gold. Trades on gold that doesn't physically exist. If you go full on into conspiracy theory, they'll say there is no actual gold. That vaults are empty. And all that exists are paper claims. I'm not going that far. Let's say only 10% is real, physical gold. Then 20% more is just paper gold on top. So everyone kind of turns a blind eye. Normally, when you short an asset, you're supposed to hold what you sell. But here, it just gets rolled over. That's how they've been suppressing the price of gold. But even that won't last forever. A moment of reckoning always comes. Eventually, it all slips out of their control. Now, James Rickards, as brilliant as he is, seems to lack a deeper understanding of Bitcoin. He sees the digitization of assets, and how, at critical moments, like what happened in Cyprus, as we saw there, or in Greece, they just locked up the ATMs, froze withdrawals from the banks, and froze people's assets. It makes it much easier to impose control, right? And anything digital can be hacked too. Even though Bitcoin itself can't be hacked that easily, they could just take down the exchanges. It's not the same as real gold. That's how he sees it. That's exactly why I stress the finality of settlement. And that's why, as I said before, when a geopolitical crisis hits, Bitcoin becomes a powerful hedge in response. So as for Bitcoin's price, if the Fed keeps raising interest rates aggressively, it might crash even harder than other asset bubbles. But once it triggers a financial crisis or geopolitical shocks, gold and Bitcoin will be reframed in a completely new light. And when that shift in perception happens, it will become incredibly difficult to obtain the real thing. And by real, I mean Bitcoin that's not stored on an exchange. So Bitcoin that is held on exchanges. Why is that a problem? Because of the travel rule, which you've probably heard about. It will only be allowed to move from one exchange to another. The state has the power to enforce that. And what does that mean? It means you don't truly have your Bitcoin. When the freeze described in this book happens, do you think they won't freeze exchanges? So how do you secure real Bitcoin? Well, if you followed my channel, you already know. Should you be securing Bitcoin in your own wallet? Could Korea be hit by a geopolitical crisis? And what about a financial one? That too is certainly within the realm of possibility. What's clear is 2022 and 2023 look like very difficult years. So the elites aligned with this so-called third world view are trying to maintain order. No matter which assets are inflating, whether deflation strikes or whether inflation spirals out of control. Ideally, we'd have a controlled deflation. That's the best the elites can hope for. But I don't think it's going to play out that way. Once a phase transition kicks in, no matter how hard the elites try, if events start unfolding beyond their control, they'll be pushed to take even more extreme measures. And when they turn to extreme measures, like when Elon Musk was essentially forced to buy Bitcoin, that's a form of capital control. When drastic capital controls are imposed, Bitcoin emerges as the alternative, not gold.